Just before we have this conversation, to quickly inform you that there has been a fire outbreak at Plymouth Road in Edo State. There it is right there. Of course, there's been a response by the fire service promptly to take care of that and ensure it doesn't spread worse than it already has. But we'll most certainly bring you more information as it unfolds. This happened just this morning, and as we have more information, we'll definitely bring to you to let you know. Plymouth Road, Benin City, there was a fire incident that took place this morning, and the authorities have gotten there. Now, this conversation we're about to have is with, of course, as you've seen in the welcoming slide, Babatunde Irukera, who is the Executive Vice Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC. Of course, an institution you formerly knew as Consumer Protection Council. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
I was going to begin by asking if you also got one of those text messages.
Multiple.
Oh, really?
Yes, multiple.
Give us an example. One that said someone died or someone owed money?
More, this person is fraudulent, is on the run, is an economic saboteur, and typically people I don't really know. Obviously people who might have my telephone number, and sometimes they would say that police are looking for him or court summons, there's been an order, and I know it's false.
Okay. Tell us about what exactly, because I'm sure so many people would receive these text messages sometimes and they will wonder, I know this fellow, what exactly is going on? But perhaps for some people to understand, there are what have been christened loan sharks in the country today. Tell us about them. What exactly are we dealing with here?
And so what it is that money lending is an industry of its own, and there's a legitimate way to do it. And some do it legitimately. Some financial institutions, including those who take deposits, also do money lending. However, what it seems that there's an expanded approach to it, where there's some who are unregulated in some sense. Unregulated in the sense that they're not licensed by the central bank or any other regulator. And there's been a proliferation to the point where with technology, it's just an app. You can download the app and borrow money from there.
Just a quick one. You say they are unregistered. Are there those of these loan sharks, as we call them, that are registered?
Oh, there are many financial institutions that provide the same service. Many microfinance banks. There are even money lenders who, because they have, they can take deposits. They're licensed with the central bank, but also do the same business.
Okay. Do they also conduct business the same way as these?
Typically, most of the licensed ones don't.
Okay.
I mean, you might find where a licensed operator would break the law in some shape or form, but certainly not as egregious as the things we've seen. And we've been at this for months, and the ones that we've proceeded against, we worked with the central bank, and they provided information about all the ones who are licensed to them. And we've received complaints, even against the ones that are licensed by the central bank. But those are easier to resolve because you can find who to engage and you can resolve the complaint.
So there was this crackdown last week?
Yes.
Right. What exactly happened?
And so what it was that late last year we had created a joint regulatory enforcement task force between the FCCPC, the ICPC, the FCC, the NCC, National Human Rights Commission, and the Central Bank. And so we had a few meetings and created an enforcement task force. And first thing we did was to tease this into different buckets. The ones that were licensed by the central bank, what complaints we had against them. And these are not regular complaints. The two issues that we proceeded with were with respect to interest rate compounding and a lack of clarity. And then what was considered a violation of privacy by public shame. And so after we put them in the different buckets, the teams continue to meet to develop a regulatory approach. There's a regulation drafting approach where teams are writing up what the requirements should be going forward. But at the same time, there were complaints continuing to rise with respect to the conduct of those, especially the public shaming conduct. So we created the enforcement task force, and for months, they were monitoring and trying to gather as much information about the businesses. We set up a portal for the public to provide information, thousands and thousands of mails to the portal, assisted with the information gathering. Then we started doing our reconnaissance work, and just locating them was just incredibly difficult. And some you would locate within a month, they would move. And so we continued to follow until we got sufficient credible intelligence about when and where to strike.
And that takes me to the next question. You worked with the police as well. I think you got some court go-ahead to clamp down, as it were, on some of this. What did you find out? I saw some names. I'd not even heard of those names before at the court. But what were the things you found out? I saw pictures of you addressing some of them with a team. And I wanted to be there personally just to honestly see what goes on behind the scenes with these loan sharks or what have you. What did you find out?
Quite interesting, and you're right. What we did was to proceed, because, I mean, when you're exercising an enforcement authority at that level, you need probable cause. And you have to convince a court about the evidence you have is sufficient to move, and the court granted us an order to search and seize. And what we found was quite surprising. You would arrive at a company. We already knew that many times multiple companies were operated by the same people. And so we confirmed that. What I personally found surprising was you'd enter into a whole floor of a building of up to 800, maybe 900 people working just like telemarketing or like a technical support center.
Did you say 800?
Yes, yes. I mean, the working conditions were poor, very hot, limited bathroom facilities, and these people, and there were records and pastings of what their workflow was. You must make 120 calls with, easily on any one day you make hundreds of calls. So they're under pressure. You have a laptop, some of them headphones, and a telephone. That's the tool. And on the laptop, that's the interface. So you're going to see somebody's name, their account information, who they are. You can see information about who their parents or next of kin are. And then you have an icon for address book. If you click on that address book, the entire contacts on that person's telephone number is there. And so they have pre-written messages right there on the computer. And so the interface, the technological interface is between the computer and the phone system. So they've got all these messages, the intimidation messages, photographs of the borrower. And so right there at their computer, they're either making calls, sending these messages, and sometimes manufacturing the stories.
This sounds like a sophisticated, setup. I mean,
quite.
You get laptops, you get the applications, the softwares that can, connect to a mobile phone, send those messages, and I'm talking bulk messages. But are you talking about the registered ones or the unregistered ones?
So what we did was that the raid was with respect to unregistered ones.
So these unregistered ones had such...
Absolutely. Pretty sophisticated.
And their offices were...
They had employees, they have HMO, they have health management, health insurance for their employees. Pretty elaborate arrangement.
I'll come to what should happen, in the aftermath of your crackdown, because I imagine there's something meant to come out of it. But let me go into uncharted waters, and this is me stepping into, landmines, as it were. So people approached these companies to secure loans, as it were, and there were terms and conditions. I imagine some of these loan sharks provided the funds. In fact, some of them do very fast. They say in less than 24 hours you get your loans. And these people that approached them signed up to the terms and conditions, collected the money, as it were. Now, there are a lot of unethical things, but in terms of that, I gave you money, you're meant to pay back, you have not paid back. Would you blame, or at least put some blame at the doorstep of those people who approached them to get the loans?
I think their prerogative to recover their loans is invalid. And I think that consumers owe an obligation to repay the loans. As a matter of fact, money lending is an important financial inclusivity product for the market. And the only way other consumers can benefit from it is that those who take loans pay. Yeah. However, there are repayment or collection methods that are prohibited. Also, for instance, if you've gotten a text in the past, you didn't sign up for a loan, and your telephone number belongs to you. You exercise the discretion to give it to someone. And so it ends up with somebody else who's going to contact you with that kind of message, not to mention the damage it does. Now, that you borrow money and you default on it, does that make you a fugitive? Does that make you a criminal? Does that make you a fraudster?
Or dead.
Or dead, or diseased. And so publishing that kind of information that's defamatory, essentially, to everybody on your contact list, that's obviously excessive.
Okay, so what next now? Now that this crackdown has happened, because there are so many other things we would love to have you converse with you on, but what next? What follows this crackdown? Because
they're very amorphous. I think we've only just seen the beginning. As we speak, it's still going on. I suspect even some of the companies that were raided have found it difficult because they're quite nimble. And so there's quite a long road ahead to, we're going to keep doing this. One of the things we've also done is that as we were arriving in those places, we're also issuing orders to banks. And so some of the intelligence we've gathered are certain account numbers that are used for the business. So we're freezing those accounts. And we're also, for the applications that we've identified inappropriate businesses, we've also entered an order to the app stores to take those applications down. There's going to be quite some work to clean it up, but on the back of that, to put any of those on the app store in the future, you're going to have to comply with certain regulatory parameters. And so over a period of time, I'm sure we'll clean the space up.
These parameters will be issued by FCCPC?
Yes, we will issue the parameters.
Okay.
Which will be first, we've got to know the company. There's got to be a complaint resolution process. There's got to be a place where people can go when they're displeased. And there's got to be a code of conduct principles and guidelines that they must sign off on with respect to their collection methods.
How do people know legitimate money lending businesses just such as
There's no way for them to know. There's absolutely no way for them to know. There's absolutely no way.
But you said they're registered.
There's some that are registered, but all of them do business by putting up an app. So to the extent that you're going to the app store to download an app, you can't know which one is registered or not. I mean, the regulator, the central bank can know which one is registered or not, but the consumers cannot tell.
So approach at your risk, as it were. You know what? If there's anything consumers need right now, it's a lot of protection, right? I mean, from the loan sharks, but now energy, petrol. And this is something a lot of us have experienced, and I'd like you to speak to it. We'll talk about aviation fuel. I recall you were at the National Assembly recently where you had to speak to, the House of Reps. But a lot of people have to buy petrol for over 200 naira. And last time we asked, petrol price has not been increased. Some people buy it for 250. We put out a question last week, and people told us ridiculous amounts they bought petrol for. What is the FCCPC doing in that sense?
And you're right. I mean, it's a season where consumers seem to have no respite. But with respect to PMS, what we had was an unusual intervening circumstance that created a shortage, which was off-spec supply. And taking that out of the market and then expanding the supply chain to replace created some level of constraint. And as usual, once there is a constraint in the market, you know that those who take advantage of that situation, including the retailers themselves, they actually had to create a team with the DSS, the regulator, and even the NNPC to go from filling station to filling station at night. Because what it was that some of the filling stations would just not sell fuel during the day because they didn't want to sell at pump price. And then at night, when they could make people pay more. And so the scarcity was not truly reflective of supply. And that's the problem. And it's the same thing in Jet 1 fuel also. And so we're doing all we can. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a society that self-regulates, because the totality of law enforcement and regulators cannot police the entire country. It's just not possible.
But have you had some level of success with some
Absolutely.
of these? How many have you clamped down on? What kind of punitive measure has been taken? Perhaps it will serve as a lesson to others.
Right. So one of the things that happens is that with the regulator, they immediately blacklist. And then once you're blacklisted and you're not getting supplies, your business is going to go down. I mean, that's the most important consequence, to make sure that you're unable to do business in the manner that you were doing business.
But on the flip side, I mean, because this is a chain, right? Yes. So the consumers, are you protecting the retailers as well? Because I tell you that we get these things from the depot at almost 190, 200 naira. So how much do you expect us to sell? I mean, that's trying to understand their own point of view. So perhaps they need some protection as well. So do you really go through the whole chain?
Many times problems arise at different points in the value chain. And so, for instance, law enforcement and security operatives are escorting tankers from depots straight to stations to eliminate a number of the different interventions along the supply chain. So yes, we're doing some work and protecting them in the sense that ensuring that all those tolls in the value chain do not occur, so they can take PMS directly from depot straight to their stations and sell at the right price.
Are you able to track points of escalation of these prices? Because we understand that in Nasarawa, in Jos, in different parts of the country, as my colleague told you, we had to ask questions out yesterday, and people was getting fuel at ridiculously exorbitant prices. So have you been able to discover a point of escalation of these fuel prices?
Now, because there are few regulators and agencies in that supply chain space, we focus more on the market end when things get to consumers. But historically, fuel prices not being the right pump price has been a problem in Nigeria, especially as you go further up north or into the hinterland. But for years, that seemed to have been brought under control until this situation arose again. So I think whatever those mechanisms were that the regulators had put in place were potentially compromised because of a situation. And I'm pretty certain that we'll get back to some normalcy.
I'm sorry, we're totally out of time, but you said something, I need you to touch on it perhaps in 30 seconds, that the society needs to self-regulate. So what does that mean? What do I need to do? Because, I mean, there are filling stations around us that are selling for over 200. So what does that mean?
So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, that filling station is not a government entity. And so we as people really need to understand what is right and what is fair. And for the most part, just do it. And
what do I do? What can I do?
Well, it might not be you as a person, but whoever that gas station owner is an individual or a private business, certainly not a government entity. And so if we're going to wait for the government to come and whack every filling station, it's going to take forever.
Well, let's hope that forever doesn't
take forever
to come, because at the end of the day, just as you say, it's a business entity. They are there to make money, not to run into losses as well, and they are not a social service. So ultimately, some people recruited to do some jobs need to do it. Maybe we ask for more staff of FCPC. Don't answer that question yet. Babatunde Irukera is CEO, Federal Competition Consumer Protection Commission. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, a few messages have come in.